Alright, how's everyone doing today? Welcome to my channel, and thanks for tuning in. We do educational videos. We like to focus on great theories of everything that you probably haven't heard of. All-encompassing theories, grand unified theories, cosmologies, and also tour de forces, magnum opuses, and earth-shattering discoveries, and mostly coming from obscure sources. We hope that this will help you with your paradigm shifting, your awakening to 5D consciousness, your formation of a holistic worldview, and your quest for better spiritual, mental, and physical health. Today is our 240th video under the rubric of the Reciprocal Church, which is named in honor of Dewey B. Larson, father of the reciprocal system of theory, which I've got about 580 some videos on this channel. Which is, I think, the most thorough and impressive theory of everything that's out there, and elegant and relatively simple. Nothing's going to be that simple. Not a theory of everything, but and also very well researched and thorough in its presentation, although very difficult because it requires you to use unfamiliar concepts and to understand them. So that's why I try to walk you through it and in the videos. But in this case, the Reciprocal Church is an attempt to put together spiritual resources from these obscure sources, things that you can believe in, things that you can hang your hat on, things that you can verify for yourself, things that you can measure and that you can replicate, and things that you can rationalize. You know, you can they follow logic and reason. Now, they may not seem like they follow logic and reason until you kind of understand it. You know, they are what you call trans-rational. They're beyond rational, but they ultimately will yield to rationality. But you might not be looking at it the right way to do that at first blush. Anyway, we're doing that because we are recognizing that the Western religions are about to cave in because of lack of belief. As soon as people start to realize how many holes there are in the Holy Bible, there are major problems coming out at the seams, and we're going to go over some of that right now. Looking at the work of Michael Menescot's, his book called The Origins of Christianity, so we'll be focusing on the New Testament. Origins of Christianity as a Flavian secrecy cult. Menescot's is one of at least 5 authors that I know of who, through their own research, have determined that the Gospels were written by the Romans, in particular by Josephus, who was an adopted member of the royal Roman family of the Flavian Caesars. His name is Flavius Josephus, and according to his autobiography, he was a Jew and a general in the war against between the Jews and the Romans from 66 to 73 AD. But he surrendered to Vespasian, who was the first Flavian emperor, but at the time was the general. And he surrendered to him and saw the light, so to speak, and recognized that no longer did God favor the Jews, but now favored the Romans. And so he defected to the Romans, predicted that Vespasian would one day become emperor. And when Vespasian did become emperor, he pardoned Josephus, brought him to Rome, adopted him as part of his family, and made him the court historian, if you believe that. And Josephus turned around and wrote the book called Jewish War, or Wars of the Jews. And if you read that book, it's really 7 books. If you read those books, you will get the unmistakable impression that they have a lot in common with the Gospels. And if you read them carefully, you will recognize that there are a lot of conceptual parallels. In particular, a lot of things that Jesus predicts during his 3-year ministry in Judea are actually fulfilled by generals Titus or Vespasian, his son, or Vespasian or Titus, his son, the Roman generals, in their Titus's in particular 3-year military campaign in Judea. And wherever Jesus goes, Titus goes. And whatever Jesus does or predicts in a symbolic or as a parable, those things happen literally to Titus and his men. And the parallels can be very, very, very intricate. We will be going over the new root and branch, which you have to know a lot of background information to understand the parallels and to decode it. But there's really 7 different passages from 7 different locations in the text to show that basically the purpose of what they were doing is to basically domesticate the Jews, or to tame the Jews, and using homeopathy. And they wanted to, because they fought the Jews in this war, but there were plenty of insurrections and revolutions before the 150 years before that. And so the Roman Caesars just decided that we've had enough of these Jews. What can we do to mellow them out, to domesticate them? And they decided to propose a Jewish hero and savior who believed in turning the other cheek, who was a prince of peace, who believed in rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and who believed in walking an extra mile with the Roman soldier's pack on his back, and to call the Roman centurion slave owner the greatest faith in all of Israel. So that's what they did. And eventually they decided to also unfurl this onto the Christians. And those are called the Pauline epistles. Not the Christians, but the Gentiles, the slaves and the soldiers particularly, the non-Jews. And so those were the Pauline epistles, which scholars, for very little reason, think that the Pauline epistles were written before the Gospels, but they were actually written much later, in about 100 to 110 AD. And they were written by a guy named Pliny the Younger, who was also a family member of this guy so-called Josephus, who was really named Arius Calpurnius Piso. And they were close relatives to Vespasian and Titus, the Flavian emperors. And they put this together with incredible detail. It's a masterpiece of evil. It's designed specifically to get Christians to hate Jews. The people that are then converted by this kind of propaganda then are taught to hate the Jews. And there are degrading, mocking, and mean-spirited jokes and humor all throughout. And but they throw in, it's a limited hangout. You know, they had to throw in some stuff that you can, that you can, your heart, that's kind of right in your heart, and that part is mostly the Roman Stoicism of Seneca and some of the Neoplatonism, Greek Neoplatonism, I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what scholars they're drawing on in particular there. Some Egyptian mythology, philosophy, or theology. Also some Sumerian. A lot of other mythologies, Mithraism, Hindu theology, and also a lot of zodiac or astrotheology, meaning like the stars and the planets and the sun and the moon, and a lot of pornography. If you know the code, these people were all like, these were Romans. They were like the most perverted people that have ever lived. And they put a lot of that into the Gospels, if you can decode the language, which we're learning how to do here. Now, what Menescott does in his book is that he crosses the book of Luke with Wars of the Jews. So he divides Wars of the Jews up into 694 paragraphs. And Luke is divided up into 24 chapters. And he puts the 24 chapters on the vertical axis. And he puts the 694 paragraphs on the horizontal axis. Then when he finds a parallel, he plots the point. In some cases, possibly more than one point. And you would expect something like that to end up with a whole lot of chaos or noise, no message. But instead, it makes 5 Roman letters, APTVS, which I think stands for Arius Piso Titus Vespasianus, but he thinks something slightly different. But what he does, he finds 250 parallels between Jewish War by Josephus and the Book of Luke. Just the Book of Luke has 250 parallels. That means as you go through your Bible, I think the Book of Luke is 15 or 20 pages. That means that there's like more than 10 on every page. So, you know, it's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. Now, some of the parallels, you have to know some background information. Some of them are kind of weak. Some of them are incredibly strong and obvious, and some of them are incredibly well hidden. Like where it's obvious that there's a parallel there, but if you read them side by side, you wouldn't see it until it's pointed out to you. So the Romans and a lot of ancient peoples did this as kind of a recreation. This is kind of a game that they played, punning and typology and other kind of word games they used. That was a kind of form of entertainment. But it was also, in particular, a form of wartime propaganda in this case. So what the value in this book for me is that Menescott goes over all of the parallels that he finds. And so you can really see case by case, how these parallels are. And he dug out a lot of things. It took him years to do this. Some of them you can judge for yourself, whether, okay, that's a legit one. That one is real shaky. I don't see that one at all, or whatever. But the point is that whoever wrote Wars of the Jews by Josephus, or Piso, or whoever was his pen name, is the same entity who wrote the New Testament. There are too many parallels, and they parallel each other. So it's not that Jewish war just parallels the Gospels. It goes both ways. Okay, so we're going to start with Jewish War, paragraph 555. That's book 5, chapter 5, paragraph 4. The Holy Temple has a holy curtain described as representing all that was mystical in the heavens, which is apparently the only use of heavens in the plural in the entire 7 books of the Jewish War. Okay, so described as representing all that was mystical in the heavens. And he says that these paragraphs go to some lengths to describe a great abundance of gold and silver in the temple, and how much it is, which is just a ridiculous amount. I think it's some amount of like 50 tons of gold or something like that, and as many tons of silver. Okay, but that's basically treasure. And now we go to the book of Luke, chapter 12, verse 32. Fear not, little flock. And then he goes on, provide yourselves bags which do not age, a treasure in the heavens, which is also the only use of the word heavens in the book of Luke. A treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches or moth corrupts. Where your treasure is, there will be your heart too. So I think that's kind of I don't know if this is true, but this is my hypothesis, is that this is kind of the secret to finding these parallels. Just pretty much assume that in Josephus and in the Gospels, there are no extraneous words or passages. There's nothing in there at random. And so when they kind of veer off and say something random, it's like, oh, that doesn't quite make sense, or that's an interesting word. Why aren't they using that word? Or something like that. That's a point or a trigger to you that this is a parallel. This is not part of the normal script or the story that they're telling. This is part of a parallel. And so then you need to probably look for that same word probably in Luke, because you probably know Luke a little bit better than you know Wars of the Jews. And Luke is very short compared to the length of Wars of the Jews. So that's what I would recommend, is to read over Josephus's Wars of the Jews, and whenever he makes kind of an offhand comment or uses a word that's not quite like, so using heavens instead of heaven, using little flock, using treasure, these are words that, you know, maybe would trigger you to say, I wonder if that word or concept is used in Luke somewhere. And probably if you know Luke well enough, you probably can come up with the answer and find it. I would imagine that that's how he found these. Okay, so that's just a short paragraph from both, and now he's going to kind of go through the analysis, I believe. Comparing the two stories side by side, we can see that whilst Jewish war merely describes the wondrously beautiful fabric curtain concealing the large empty space that the Jewish God was thought to reside in, Luke mocks this fabric by suggesting moths could eat it. Now, where does he say that? He says, fear not, little flock, provide yourselves bags, meaning fabric. Provide yourselves bags which do not age, a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches or moth corrupts. So provide yourselves bags which do not age, as opposed to the bags discussed in the temple, in the curtain in the temple. And so I'm guessing that that's the same curtain that rips when some portentous event happened. I don't know if that was the crucifixion, or I believe it was the crucifixion, then the curtain of the temple is rent. So maybe that's it. So anyway, Luke mocks this fabric by suggesting moths could eat it. Knowing that the secrecy cult would promote the idea of Flavian supreme gods residing in the firmament, we can see why Jesus is pointing to the heavens as somewhere safe from worldly deterioration. Okay, hopefully he continues on here, but I got to turn the page, which is sometimes an adventure. Okay, yeah. Well, he doesn't go any further on that parallel. You know, it was definitely a parallel. There was fabric. There was a curtain. Well, the curtain or the fabric, and then there was the treasure, and the heavens. Okay, this one is from Jewish War 561, which is Book 5, Chapter 6, paragraph 2. Titus identified a weak point in Jerusalem's defenses as the Tower of John, which the builders had neglected to fortify, meaning it wasn't finished. The text of the Jewish War seems to mock the Jews for this. And Josephus attempted to talk to the Jews about terms of peace, for he was known by them. Okay, so this is after Josephus has already defected. He's trying, you know, he hasn't defected, like he's not a full traitor. He has defected because he believes that the Romans are going to win the war, that there's nothing that the Jews can really do about it, other than, you know, what he says that he believes God favors the Romans. But I think that kind of just means that he knows that the Romans are going to win this war. And, you know, if we surrender now, we'll, you know, lessen all the carnage, you know, all the death. And so he, as an agent of the Romans, is trying to make a treaty with the Jews, trying to make a peace with the Jews. For he was known by them. The Jews refused, and so Titus knew that they would not listen. Like, if they won't even listen to him, they're not going to listen to Titus, is the idea there. And going back a paragraph, he just says, the Jews in the city had 10,000 men besides the Idumeans. And Idumea is a province a little bit south of Judea. It's supposed to be where the Herodians are from, where Herod and the rest of his dynasty is from. But I don't know if that is correct. Now we go to Luke 14, verse 25 to 32. Who, intending to build a tower, doesn't first assess whether he can afford to finish it? Otherwise, they will mock him, saying, this man began to build and was unable to finish. And what king going to make war does not sit down first and consult whether he be able to win with 10,000 against 20,000? Or else send an ambassage, like an ambassage, seeking conditions of peace, which is what Josephus did. So there's plenty of parallels there. I mean, you know, you could say that that's a coincidence, but then when you're hit with, you know, 200 others in the same, you know, kind of category, you know, it's just that it's not utterly obvious, but it's clearly a parallel in my mind. So he now says, a few paragraphs further, we find this parallel above, where Jewish War describes that one location of Jerusalem's tower defenses hadn't been finished, and that the Jews refused to talk terms of surrender. It is now apparent that when Jesus discusses these two issues, the Gospels are actively mocking the inhabitants of Jerusalem, again finding a way to suggest that their destruction was their own fault. Okay, now I wish you would kind of, even though it might seem, he does it kind of without saying so when he puts these parallels, because he has kind of the different parallels in ink, in a colored ink. So he's using a few different colors. Here he's got red, blue, and green. And, so the 10,000 is in green. And the what king wanting to make war does not sit down and consult, send an ambassador like Josephus, so that's in blue. And then, the same in the parallel passage. And then he's got some stuff in red that has to do with finishing the tower and not first seeing whether you can afford to finish it. Building something that you're not able to finish. Okay, now he's going to another parallel. I'm thinking that this parallel is a little bit too involved to get into right now with the amount of time that we have. Well, I think we can do the parallel. We might not be able to do all the analysis. Okay, Jewish War. This is right, the next passage, 562, 563, and 566. So book 5, chapter 6, and early chapter 7. Titus, the son of the emperor, had, as mentioned, set camp at the Mount of Olives and had come to destroy Jerusalem. He bombards Jerusalem with great catapult stones, but the Jews see them coming because the stones are white. And since the stones are audible and visible, the Jews cry out, "The sun comes." The suns are coming. So to address this, the Romans blackened the stone. So they're not white anymore, they're black, so they're harder to see. At this time, a certain Jew was taken alive, who by Titus's order was crucified before the wall. And the Romans got control of the first wall on the 7th of June, which is early summer, apparently. I don't know, that sounds late spring. But so in conjunction with a crucified Jew, Titus is described at the Mount of Olives, and they decried the sun comes. As the stones made great noise, they were hidden from their eyes. Thus, now it says Titus was coming into Jerusalem when summer was nigh. And now we go to the book of Luke, chapter 19, verse 40. But also apparently a little bit from Matthew thrown in from a few different chapters of Matthew, 21, 24, and 28. Jesus was at the Mount of Olives outside Jerusalem and said, so they're always in the same locations. The parallels, at least as far as I can tell, either always or almost always are at the same location where a parallel occurs. That's another way to look at them. Knowing when, if you're reading Josephus, you see he goes to a certain location, you can probably go into the book of Luke and find it. I think what I'm going to do eventually is I'm going to I'm going to do a complete decode of the book of Luke with all this stuff in, but with other sources in. So there'll probably be about 300 parallels or more. And I'm going to just do it live. And, you know, however long it takes. It probably take 12 hours or something. Okay, Jesus was at the Mount of Olives outside Jerusalem and said, I tell you that if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. The stones are audible. And when he came near, he beheld the city and wept or cried over it, saying, but now they are hidden from your eyes. For the days shall come upon you that your enemies shall cast a trench about you. Before Jesus' crucifixion at the Mount of Olives, Jesus said, the stones will cry out, and this is hidden from your eyes, and they will dig a trench around you, and the sun will come again in one generation, which was in Jewish terms at that time 40 years. When summer is nigh, but his face will be hidden, and he says implicitly white, in this case meaning Roman, in this case meaning blonde or golden, because that's what Flavius means. The Flavian emperors, the blonde or golden emperors. So here, in conjunction with Jesus' describing his second coming, he also talks about stones crying out and something being hidden from your eyes. The matching section in Jewish War describes how Titus fired stones that made a whizzing sound and led the Jews to cry out, the sun comes, until the Romans blackened the stones to prevent them from being seen. By equating the white stones coming with the sun coming, this is suggesting that the sun, that's S-O-N, sun is white, meaning a white man, a Roman or a Flavian, who is disguised by being blackened in the form of a Judean, implicitly non-white from their perspective. And we will go on with more of that. There's a lot more to this parallel because the words that are used for sun, S-O-N, S-U-N, and actually what they mean is the stone cometh. And so there's a very interesting set of parallels with the words between stone and sun. And how Josephus, I'm sure he will get to this, but we will check it out next time we come back or whenever. Thanks for tuning in today.